Welcome back, Chappelle. All right, so thank y'all so much for another great day. Thank you for a great day on this crazy mass schedule. Well, not crazy, but you know what I mean. It's just super short. It's just hard to get in everything all at once. Now, shout out to C&D period for really pushing hard today, going really fast, getting as much in an hour as we could. G period, y'all might be a little bit further ahead of this. Honestly, your flip might end up being a little bit shorter than everybody else's just because y'all had that extra 20 minutes to actually, get everything done and stuff like that. But the big thing is, though, let's go ahead and get after it. We started talking about, or we wrapped up the ancient empires of the ancient civilizations, right? We had 6 of them to remember, okay? It was the Mesopotamians in totality, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Hebrews, the Phoenicians, and last but not least, the Assyrians, right? All right, now look, but the big thing, though, is that going forward, you have your quiz next class, right? Make sure you study. It's going to be multiple choice. It should not be difficult. You should be able to easily get this thing done, right? But we started off talking, too, about the ancient Greeks, right? I believe in G period, we're going to do like a little pre-assessment and stuff like that. In C and D period, we went ahead and outlined the 8 Greek time periods, right? So we talked Neolithic, Early Bronze, Minoan, Mycenaean, Dark Ages, Archaic, Classical, Hellenistic, which is great that we actually got there and you're starting to realize that. But we now need to dive into Greece in general, right? So first and foremost, we need to locate where the modern day country of Greece is, because you are going to need to know that, because next week you're going to have a map quiz based on the countries that actually surround Greece in the modern era, right? So if you're looking at this map, you've got Africa, South America, Asia, Europe right here. The thing about ancient Greece is its location, its geography, its farmable land. Has a lot to do with how people managed to found this area and why they chose to go there. And where it's located, does anybody know where it's located? Does anybody know where it's located? Good job, Caroline. I know you know where it is. It's right there. All right, so that is Greece right there. It's actually right next door to Italy and all the way basically to the eastern side of Europe, right next to Turkey. So it's between Italy and Turkey. This is Turkey right here, if you didn't know. But going into it, Greece's geography is wildly different from the other civilizations we just got done talking about. Most of the civilizations we just finished talking about are mostly river valley civilizations, right? You had the Egyptians surrounding the Nile. You had the Mesopotamians around the Tigris and Euphrates. You had the Babylonians around the Euphrates. You had everybody centered around major waterways, right? The thing about it is, looking at Greece, you'll notice that it doesn't seem like there's any major waterways other than just the ocean, right? Also, another interesting thing you'll notice is that is not a hurricane map. I know that's what it looks like. It looks almost like a Doppler hurricane map. But this is actually a, topographic map of ancient Greece, or Greece in general. Now, topography is its elevation. So the darker red you see means that there's a higher elevation. So that indicates the fact to you that Greece is extremely mountainous, right? Greece is very, very mountainous, and it heavily plays in to the growth of this civilization because you're going to see the separation of these city-states, and it's going to lead to these city-states each being very, very unique, right? So basically, let's say hypothetically that I was born in ancient Greece, and then Mr. Mathern was born in ancient Greece, and so was Mr. Madrano, right? But we're from 3 different city-states. So Greece was not a centralized kingdom. Big thing to remember for that quiz, was not a centralized kingdom like the Egyptians were. The Egyptians were ruled from one location, one capital, and had one kingdom. The Mesopotamians were spread all over the place. Same thing with Greece, spread all over the place. So if me, Mr. Madrano, and Mr. Mathern were all born in ancient Greece, and we were born in 3 different city-states, our cultures would be wildly different. So maybe Mr. Madrano's city-state does certain things that mine and Mr. Mathern doesn't. We share a common language. We speak the same language. However, since we grew up so isolated from one another due to this mountainous terrain, our lives every day would be very different. For example, Mr. Mathern's from this really intense warrior class where he's all about becoming a soldier and stuff. He's from this place called Sparta. And then Mr. Madrano's from Athens, so he's a super huge nerd and stuff like that. He's all about his government and his philosophy. Mr. Terry's from Corinth. I'm just this weird odd man out, right? Now, that isn't really important to know, so I do need you to do me a favor. Go ahead and highlight that mountainous thing right there. Go ahead and highlight that. Make sure you know it, star it. And also, you need to know the bodies of water that it borders. The major body of water that Greece juts out into is the Aegean Sea. Now, where they do not have a river, they do have this large ocean, or excuse me, this large sea to be able to create natural harbors and be able to trade goods over great distances. So the fact that the sea has also many islands offers a lot of really good contact with other civilizations in terms of trade and sometimes war. Now, the early Greeks did get into some early wars, the Mycenaeans with the Trojans, and we'll talk all about that in a little bit. You know that as the Trojan War or the War with Troy. Then going forward, you'll also notice something else. Notice it said contact. So the early Greeks had to be a seafaring people, were heavily reliant on trade, and also had a lot of contact with a lot of other groups. So it's very important to know that because their adoption of many cultural things that they do, for example, their alphabet, their writing styles, certain crops that they could grow really well there that aren't naturally endemic to that area, actually came from other ancient civilizations that were like existing at the time. So when we talked about this, the Hittites, the Assyrians, the Mesopotamians, some of the ancient Mesopotamians, the Egyptians, all those guys were around and living while the ancient Greeks were very, very tiny, right? So the other big thing, though, that you need to know is this down here. Only 20% of ancient Greece is farmable land. Now, that doesn't mean you can't grow stuff in that farmable land. You can. There are certain things that grow really, really well in Greece, including things like barley, oats, grapes, and olives, right? So those things grow really well in a Mediterranean climate. Basically, what this number means is that you just can't grow anywhere. So where your civilization is and where your city-states are is heavily dependent on your access to farmable land. So that dictated where a lot of these city-states went and further separated them even more, but it also made them heavily reliant on trade to be able to get certain foodstuffs that they actually could not grow there or actually, grow in a plentiful amount anyway. So going into it, though, we know that time is divided into chunks. We talked about Paleolithic and Neolithic. We talked about BC and AD, BCE, CE. We talk about all these different time periods. And in every unit, you'll have some time periods pretty much that you'll need to remember all the way up until the Renaissance. Time is divided into these chunks so we can better understand it, so we can break it down and so the human mind can comprehend it. Because time is a very weird thing. It's something that we've kind of invented to make it so we understand how old something is, how long it could last, and what has happened throughout the span of history. So getting into it, though, this is the first one that we start off with. Remember we had it on the board that Nathan eats bacon, meanwhile mommy dances at Charlie's house? So remember, the Neolithic era comes first. And this is legit the only slide that we talk about it. The Neolithic era just means that some artifacts and some settlements started showing up. We started seeing people farming. We started seeing people create things. We started seeing civilizations and city-states form. All the Neolithic era means is that people had gone to Greece, decided to live there, started farming there, made some stuff. So as you can see, this lasts from about 6,000 to 2,900 BC. It's a very simple era. You've got artisans making pots and stuff like that. You have some primitive sculptures appearing that may indicate the actual growth of religion and or possibly like some type of ritualistic function. But we just know that they're just Neolithic Greeks. Kind of like when we talked about, like all they did was farm. They don't really have a culture or an intensity yet. But then moving forward, right about 2900, this metal was created. Well, not by the Greeks. They had kind of been running around with the Assyrians and several other groups before then. But the Greeks finally started learning how to use bronze from about 2900 to 2000. So the Bronze Age, or the early Bronze Age, is very, very important because it is defined by the introduction of that metal. So it was used to create weapons, pots, armor, and it also shows us as a historical community their contact with other civilizations is growing because they're learning how to make these different items from people like the Hittites or the Egyptians. They're learning how to do certain things from other people. It also shows us that their trade must be growing a little bit depending on where they're located. Now, really cool, very important thing too is to know what bronze is and what it's made out of. So go ahead and write this down. It's very, very important. Bronze is made from combining two metals. So it's not a pure metal, it's an actual alloy. But those two metals are copper and tin, all right? Copper, C-O-P-P-E-R, and tin, T-I-N. You combine those two metals together and you will create this alloy known as bronze. And the great thing about metal weapons versus stone weapons and things like that, or stone farming tools that maybe the Neolithic Greeks were using in the first time period, these hold an edge. These can be used for war. These can be used for more deliberate action. They last longer. They are less susceptible to breaking. So the introduction of metallurgy is very important. There are a lot of historians that argue that the introduction of metal is the thing that catapulted the Eastern Hemisphere forward, particularly in places like Europe, Southwest Asia, and Southeast Asia, catapulted them forward in technological development and also into the civilizations and the extreme aggressive forwardness that they were in time when it comes to technological development. So you're also looking at, if you were to compare it to like the Aztecs of North and South, or of Central America, that these people had no idea even existed. Well, first of all, they hadn't even founded Tenochtitlan yet, but they didn't learn how to make metals at all. They actually barely started making bronze by the time the Spanish showed up in the 1400s. So being able to make a metal is very, very important, especially when it comes to your advancement, your intensity, and all those things as well. So where are we going, though? Who are the people we're talking about in ancient Greece? What are we getting after? The big people we're going to start off by talking about are these people known as the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. And those are our next two Greek time periods, right? The Minoans are going to be created and founded on this island, which isn't even on mainland Greece. So this is mainland Greece over here. This is a chunk called Peloponnese. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But this right here is the island of Crete, all right? So the island of Crete was home to the Minoan kingdom. They are the first intense, multifaceted civilization to appear in what you would now call Greece. Now, they're not the Greeks you know. They're not the Athenians. They're not the Spartans. They're not those guys. But the Minoans are like the most ancient, sophisticated, like Greek, and they were founded on that small island of Crete. And they lasted for about 500 years. The Minoan period is going to range from about 2000 BC to about 1500 BC. Now, we don't know an aggressive, over-the-top amount about the Minoans. We truly don't. It's kind of sad. But a lot of it has to do with the fact because their civilization was so old and founded so long ago. Also because some of their artifacts may have been destroyed by war. But we know a small amount of them, about them. But we are going to, as a class, study a lot of their artifacts and their art and try to get a glimpse into their life a little bit, right? So the big thing that you usually start off with talking about when you're talking about the Minoans is they had a functional style of writing. Now, Minoan writing was known as Linear A, all right? Now, Minoan writing, though, cannot be translated at all. This right here is called the Facetus Disc, and it is the only piece of Minoan writing we have. And we have no clue what it says. We believe we have some idea of what some of the symbols may or may not mean, but the Facetus Disc literally tells us nothing other than the fact that the Minoans had a style of writing. But really big important thing when we were talking about the Mesopotamians and cuneiform and their developments and the Egyptians and hieroglyphics, one thing about writing indicates to us is that the Minoans were an intelligent civilization. They had things to document. They had things to record. They had crops that they had to account for. So being able to write sets them in motion as a Western civilization and also a major civilization. So just because we can't understand it doesn't mean that it's not super important. But remember, it's called Linear A. Can't translate it. And this is the only piece, the Facetus Disc, right? So I like to believe that it was probably just some kid that was just playing around being like, oh, look at these little pictures, and just started. Because it goes from the middle and then actually spirals outward, which is very, very strange. And also, how would you read it? Would you just turn it like this? But anyway, so the Minoan period also was characterized by major trade going on in the Aegean, right? So really quickly, we talked about a group that is a major trade civilization during class, the Phoenicians, right? The purple people, very important folks. They were the ones that kind of really put a foothold in the Mediterranean as traders. However, Minoans interacted with the Phoenicians, traded with the Phoenicians, and learned how to become master shipbuilders from the Phoenicians. They literally took that design of Phoenician-style ships and then began to augment them and create their own style ships and trade vessels. So this is what we believe some of the Minoan vessels may actually have looked like. So we'll talk about the shape of the sails later on. We'll actually get into all that. You usually know that it's a Western-style boat if it's got square sails versus triangular sails. For Eastern-style vessels, that's just like kind of a random little thing might pop up as an extra credit question on the test or whatever. But it's just like kind of funny because like I don't know why, but the ancient Chinese realized that triangular sails were more efficient like 1,000 years before any of the Westerns did. But don't get me started. But the big thing though is the Minoan period is all about trade, a legacy of trade, becoming master shipbuilders, and also becoming kind of like intricate people of the sea, right? And then another big thing that we'll talk about, and this is kind of where we'll pick up when we get into class, is a sport that we believe they had, right? So we had found several frescoes inside of their main city dwelling building, right? So, and the most major fresco, we believe, is that of this thing known as bull leaping. So we believe that there may have been even an organized sport in the Minoan kingdom, and that was known as bull leaping or bull fighting. Now, we believe it was probably both a religious ceremony and then also a sport. Please don't try this at home because it's probably a really, really good way to die, right? Because this, speaking of, this is me, right? Or this is Mr. Mathern, and this is Mr. Madrano, and that's me doing a backflip over the bull right there. And notice Mr. Madrano's just getting gored by that bull right there. It's good stuff. All right, so, but we're going to end right there. We're going to pick up on this stuff in class. Nice short flip today. Not too much to go over. You guys are doing great. I'll see y'all soon.